short notice, but there was so much demand for you that we had to pull you out of wherever you were. And it looks like you were roaming around on the streets with a hoodie. What's
Yes,
up?
yes. I was looking to see if there's someone I could mug because I'm running rough short of cash, but I couldn't find anyone, so I said I'm going to come back here.
Okay, by the way, the session has already started. I don't know if you want to reveal all this to the people at large that you're a mug.
All right. I wasn't really trying to mug him. I was just going to ask him politely for money.
Okay. And as you guys can see, Mel is out there in the outdoors in Texas. Wow, Mel, you're looking
I
pretty.
know.
And the flowers, I mean, wonderful.
I realized yesterday my schedule was so light that I could escape. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this website, but it's called hipcamp.com.
No.
And people who own private land can rent out their property essentially for camping. And so I skipped town and I'm in the land of daisies and wild hogs and snakes and grass. And
I'd swap locations with you, Mel.
What's that?
I'd swap locations with you.
Yeah, maybe we can teleport right after the live and
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, there's people already commenting. There's Sandra from Spain and Akhil from India. Please do tell us where you're from. And also, guys, by the way, maybe a different question this time, okay? The question to you is, what are you wearing right now as you're listening in? Are you in your PJs? Are you in your shorts? Okay. Or are you kind of professionally dressed for this happy hour? And what drink do you have? Today, I'm going to go with water, guys. Okay. Plain old water, the source of life, source of all life.
That's very, very pure of you, Raj.
Mm-hmm. Very pure of me. Yeah. You know, sometimes you got to do a little bit of a detox, right?
You're such a good role model.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, man. I aspire to do things that I imagine that you would do.
Oh,
I tuned into that. I said, what would Mel do now? And water coffee.
My drink this morning is iced coffee.
All right, good. All right. Hey, listen, guys, we need to jump in because last time we ran out of time, as you guys know, which was actually not such a bad thing because we got to have Professor Rao back. But I don't want to run out of time this time. Okay. So let me start with a relatively simple question. Okay. Because we're dealing with really life's big questions. So the simple question to you, Professor Rao, is how important is it for people to choose a job based off of intrinsic motivation and happiness and how much it's a passion for them as opposed to going after money, etc. Okay. I mean, I know the cliched answer is, yeah, go for your passion, right? But oftentimes you need money and, you know, the passion might come a little bit later, perhaps in the job that wasn't passionate to begin with, etc. So you got to balance out the practicality with your emotional desires and stuff. So that's the broad question. What is your take on it?
Okay. In the program that I run, Raj, I have something that I call the ideal job exercise. And when I was in business schools, I called it the ideal job exercise because it is acceptable for business schools. But in reality, it is an ideal life exercise. But essentially ask people to think and reflect really deeply on and in granular detail on what their ideal job would be. Everything, you know, where do you work, how much money do you make, how big an office do you have, what's the depth of the carpeting, how much do you travel, what kind of boss do you have, stuff like that. And as you can imagine, people would come up with parameters, 10, 15, 20. And the notion was, when all of this is there, I'm going to be really passionate about what I do. Wrong. First of all, the exact concatenation of circumstances probably doesn't exist. But even if it did and you were plugged into it, it would probably be just a few weeks or a few months before you were the same sorry, miserable self there as you are now. Because here is something that people forget. They think that I'm going to get all of this and I'll be passionate. But what I encourage people to think is passion does not exist in the job. It exists in you.
Oh.
And unless you figure out a way to unlock it, to ignite it right where you are, you're not going to find it outside. You think you're going to find it outside. You think it's in the job. It's not in the job. It's in you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you figure out a way by which you can ignite the passion inside you, you'd really be surprised at how quickly the external world transforms itself to suit the new person that you are becoming. I shared that in another context last time, but it's very true that you and the universe are in a dance. And when you lead differently, the universe has no choice but to follow differently. So stop thinking that passion is something you find outside. Passion is something that you is inside you, and you have to figure out a way by which you can ignite it within yourself. And once you do that, you'll be surprised at what changes come out outside.
That's great. So Mel was either saying hi or she had a question.
I have.
What is it?
I just have. Yeah, I'm just immediately sparked by this. So I fundamentally believe this too, and I believe as within, so without. So the world around us is directly reflecting the world within us. But sometimes, let's say you're. My dog is here and she wants to say hi.
Hey,
Let's
Hi,
say,
MJ.
passionate.
she's
Hi,
jealous.
MJ.
She wants to be a movie.
Hmm.
Let's say that I'm really depressed,
Hmm.
and I'm just instead of being full of passion, I'm full of
Hmm.
sadness, like in a very heavy way,
Yeah.
and I'm just having a really hard time seeing possibilities and seeing where I fit.
Hmm.
How do I crack open the light of passion? Where, like, what might be a way to crawl out of that darkness from
Okay,
inside?
what I'm going to say may sound harsh, but it is the truth. Well, I think it is the truth. I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not going to give medical advice. But in my opinion, depression is really nothing but mental chatter which has run amok for so long that it's created a hole very deep and you find it difficult to dig out of. Every time you are depressed, Mel, you're really living in a be centered world. Why is the world not shaping itself to the way in which I would like it to be? And I don't see any hope of making the world the way I would like it to be. And therefore, I'm going to react to that by going into a downward spiral. That's all that depression is. You're protesting that the world is not adjusting itself to the way you would like it to be. And when you have all of these thoughts of doom and gloom, and it's all going worse, and my career is stuck, and I'm going down, and my partner is leaving me, my children don't talk to me, all of that is a heck of a lot of mental chatter going on. So the only way you're going to get out of that is to have a very firm knowledge that there is mental chatter going on. You're identifying with your mental chatter as opposed to observing it, which is why it's taking you to all of these dark places. And you've got to step out of it and recognize that you are the observer, you're not the traveler. And it is not easy to do when you've got a lifetime of not doing it, but that's the only way out of this. And once you are the observer and you recognize you're not the mental chatter, you say it's going places and you don't have to go to those places. It's a slow process, but it's infallible. And you do that hard enough, and you will recognize you can dissociate, and then you'll have some small victories, and very soon you'll get out of your hole. But that's the only way you're really going to get out of it.
Mm. Yeah. So now we got to kind of preface this by saying maybe that not all of depression is perhaps down to mental chatter. It's possible that some of the depression is due to hormonal imbalances and so on.
Yeah, when you're that deeply down, my
Mhm.
personal theory is that it's a chicken and egg thing. Are the chemical imbalances what caused it, or is your thinking that eventually caused the chemical imbalances? We can have a discussion on that that'll go on forever. But that's
Mhm.
how it all starts. And if you're in a really bad case, it might be necessary to have medical intervention.
Mhm.
But medical intervention combined with what I just said is definitely going to work much better than any one alone.
I think Professor Rao, Mel did not like what you said. She's vanished.
I should drop out.
No. She must be having internet issues because she's out in the boonies. So hopefully she'll be back. Okay, poor connection, says Tanya. Maybe for her as well. So Monica has a question which I want to kind of piggyback on. This is about passion, and when you say you got to kind of get the passion, is it passion for life or passion in a particular job? And how do you even identify that passion if you're not sure? Because our educational system falls woefully short on that dimension. I don't know if you agree with me. They teach you skills, etc., but there's very little effort put into, okay, what are you meant to, what is your purpose in life? That question is unanswered, and I think it's very important to answer that question in order to unlock your passion. Would you agree?
Uh, yes and no. Yes and
Mm-hmm.
no, in the sense that, first of all, I agree with you regarding our educational institutions. I was interviewed by The Guardian in London once, and I got into a spot of trouble. I was in London Business School at that time, and I got into a spot of trouble because I said our business schools are not really educational institutions, they're indoctrination institutions.
Mhm.
So I got into a spot of trouble. But I really do believe that. I don't believe that business schools are educational institutions. For the most part, they're indoctrination institutions.
Except for a few professors like you and I and some of our
Oh,
courses.
I don't know. I'm sure that I fall into the same thing. The only thing is now I stop questioning that.
That shift in nomenclature
Yeah.
a lot.
So, but anyway, coming back to purpose, when you say it really comes down to what's the purpose in life, and this is something we all want to know. We got a question. We got a purpose, because embedded in our thinking is everything has to have a reason. And as
Mhm.
logical thinking persons, what you really want to do is you want to find this reason. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe it just is. And we lie to ourselves all the time. Raj, you lie to yourself all the time. You're a big liar, as all of us are. And are you going to push back on that?
What's that? Say that
No,
again.
I love when
Are
you
you
call
going to
Rob
push
a
back
liar.
on
I'm
that?
so into it.
Okay, both of you are speaking. So, Professor Rao, you first, and then Mel.
Okay, so aren't you going to push back when I call you a liar?
Uh, no, I was going to do it after everyone else was away. I mean, like
More
one
seriously,
on one.
you
Yeah,
know,
I'm going to take it outside with you.
if you want to have the purpose in life, I want to go very deeply into that, because this is really the crux of. See, what I always say, that when people take my course, Creativity and Personal Mastery, whether it's live or online, what I'm really doing is I'm introducing them to the rabbit hole.
Mhm.
And they get to decide how deep they want to go and how far they want to go. Because if you want to go really deep and emerge on the other side, you find that you've vanished. There's no more you. Ramakrishna had a wonderful story about this. It's like a salt doll which decides, I want to find out how deep the ocean is. And it starts going down, it starts going down. And before it's even halfway down, there is no more salt doll. So
Mhm.
it's very much like that when you say, what is the purpose of life?
Mhm.
And I would say that I would classify it as the purpose of life is to recognize that you do not exist. That everything that you are think is true is really one big vast myth and a story that you're telling yourself.
So here I think that, okay, Mel. By the way, you wanted to say something sometime back, and I'll get back to you. But Professor Rao, I don't know if you think that this is a useful way to think about things, but you got to operate in the transactional world. You got to have a job. You got to feed yourself. You got to feed your family, and at that level. So I distinguish between purpose in life and
Mhm.
purpose of life. Purpose in life is for you. You have a calling. You have you're spreading this message. For me, researching and teaching happiness, I find a lot of purpose in it. Okay, I would call that my purpose in life. Purpose of life is what I think you're tackling. And I don't know if you think that there's a usefulness in.
I'll
Um,
address it at both levels, okay? So what happens, and I covered some of this in the last session we had, which is you go through in life and you do all of this stuff, but identify with the actor, don't identify with the character. And if you identify with the actor, you're gold. No matter what's happening to the character, a lot of stuff can happen to the character. Like if you look at the world right now, it's really sad. It's bad here in the United States, where you have tons of people who literally don't have food to eat. You have mile-long queues at food banks and so on. So it's really bad. It's a lot worse in many places, including India, which both you and I have some experience of. And it's, whatever is bad here, it's an order of magnitude worse. So, what about all of those people? Does any of this make any sense to them? Actually, this is the only way that they're going to get out of it if they also recognize that they are playing in this, wonderful game, and their job is to do the best they can in that game. But to the extent that they identify with the actor rather than the character, it will make life a lot easier. Because we're always looking for, I need to have control. And you don't
mhm,
have control. And stuff like coronavirus makes it abundantly clear how little control you have.
mhm,
Nevertheless, you are going to try your level best to shape the universe to the way you want it to be. And you're going to give it your utmost effort. So, in your case, you're going to get an income. You're going to try and get a better income. You have expenses coming up. Your children are young. You have college tuition coming up, And if they don't go to the University of Texas, that will be a pretty, a decent chunk of change. So you're
Thanks
going
for
to do
reminding me of that. Yeah.
yes. That's okay. I always want to make people feel good. So when you do all of that, you're trying your level best, and you do it with, I've got certain amount of education, learning, skills. Here's what I know about life, and I'm going to use all of these together to make it happen. But while you're doing that, you're still playing the role to the utmost ability you can, but you're identifying with the character. Because ultimately, and this is the point that I really want to get across, ultimately, the only thing you ever do in life, Raj, is you work on yourself. In your playing the role you're in, professor, tenured professor, teaching folks how to be happy, father, husband, you play each of these roles to the greatest ability that you can. You want to be as much of a virtuoso as you can in each of these roles, but in the process of doing that, what you're really doing is working on yourself. And the only thing you ever do in life is you work on yourself. Now, you can do this with awareness, or you can let it happen to you. And I'm simply saying it's
Mhm.
probably a better idea to do it with awareness.
Mhm.
But the only thing you ever do is you work on yourself.
All right. So this gets me to this bunch of questions,
Mhm.
including, is awareness alone enough? Somebody kind of asked that question. Don't you also have to act? And also, if you're playing the role of an actor, doesn't it almost seem like you're being inauthentic at some level? There's a separation between um, being totally immersed in the activity or in the role and kind of observing from the outside. So even if you get angry as a father at your child, for example, or even if you love them, it seems like you're doing it as an actor, and there's something about it that doesn't sit quite well with me. And maybe you can resolve it in some fashion or the other, but I'd like to hear that. But maybe let's start with this idea that it seems to me a simpler question, which is that, is awareness alone enough, or don't you also have to act?
When you're truly aware of it,
Hmm.
that's really all that's needed. The action happens spontaneously. It's not a volitional
Hmm.
act, it happens spontaneously. I
All right.
talked the last time about when you're in a shower and you're feeling really good and you burst out into singing. The singing is a spontaneous expression of the fact that you're happy. Of course, you can also say, I'm going to take a shower and I'm going to start singing because I'm really blue. And if I start singing, it'll cheer me
Mhm.
up. That's different. So, what I'm saying is that when you're working on yourself, what you're really looking for is a state of being where your entire life is like when you burst out singing in the shower. Your entire life is a spontaneous expression of who you are, as opposed to a volitional search for happiness, meaning, fulfillment, or whatever.
Mm. Okay,
I
so I
feel
mean,
like that takes
go
so
ahead,
much
Matthew.
pressure off, don't you think? It takes so much pressure off of living
Oh,
when
completely.
That's
your
true.
whole job is to feel happy inside, and then the rest spontaneously lines up to meet you. Like, how freeing is that?
That
Versus
is
like where I grew up in New York City, it's like, no, be
Uh,
the best, work hard. And this is just, I feel like it's taking the shackles off in a way.
true.
completely.
Mhm.
In fact, when you want to be the best and work hard, because when you do that, some things are going to happen and that's going to make you happy. That's what I call the if then model. And the if then model is fundamentally flawed. It breaks down. And you know it breaks down. Because if you look back in your own life, I'm sure you can recall lots of times when you really wanted something and you got it. What happened? You were thrilled for an hour, a day, a week, and then it simply became part of the background of your life, and you went on wanting something else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. Nothing.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
money, not sex, not fame, not acclaim. All of
Mhm.
those go.
Right. I love one of the stories that you shared in this context, Professor Rao, when you were a little child and you wanted this book,
Mhm.
uh, just like mommy, just like daddy. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Oh, sure. So what happened is that I grew up in India, middle class family. Father was a government bureaucrat, mother was a homemaker. We were not poor, but there wasn't a whole lot of discretionary cash lying around. So one day we had gone for a walk. And there was a guy who had himself strapped to his stomach and in front of the stomach, and over his shoulder, and he was selling stuff from that shelf. And one of the things he was selling was a book called Just Like Daddy. It was a blue book, and if you opened it, there were a few lines of writing, and it had pictures of a little boy. He got up in the morning and he brushed his teeth just like Daddy, and a whole bunch of things just like Daddy. It was actually two books in one, because if you flipped it around, it became pink, and there was a little girl who wanted to do things just like Mommy. I really wanted that. I can't tell you why. But I wanted
Hang on, Professor Rao. There is a little bit of disturbance coming in from somewhere, which is making the audio quality poor. I don't know. Mel, is it windy where you are? Is Mel still there?
I just muted.
Yeah, we
Mel,
can't hear you, Mel. Okay.
I
So,
don't know.
you know, while your
I
audio
have
is
bad
getting cut off.
service. I'm muted.
Yeah. Put yourself on mute, Mel, if you don't mind. Sorry. Okay, but it's cutting out Professor Rao's audio. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I really wanted that book for some reason I can't figure out. So I put in a petition, and my parents looked at it. There were only a few lines of writing on it, and I was already reading junior classics, so my petition was denied. I was unhappy, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. We walked on, and the guy with the shelf walked behind, and every time I looked around, he'd flash the book at me. And my mother was a very frugal lady who hardly ever bought anything for herself, but she saw a purse she liked and she was reaching for it. And I saw my opening. And like a trained seal, I dove in. With tears rolling down my cheek, I bawled loudly and asked how she could possibly buy something as utterly useless as a purse when there was this great educational material that they were denying me. It was a low blow. It worked. I got the book back in the purse. There was coolness between my parents and me, but I didn't care. 20 years later, I was passing a flea market and I saw that book, and all the memories came flooding back. But there was a difference. And the difference was that just like Daddy, just like Mommy, no longer had any hold on me. I didn't want it. I did not want it. It was completely irrelevant to my life. I had outgrown my need for it. And that's a very useful one, because this is what I teach very early in my program. And everybody can recall something that they really wanted at some stage in their life. They may have gotten it, they may not have gotten it, but it's irrelevant to their life now. Think old boyfriends or girlfriends, or think some toy electronic gizmo you really wanted, or your first car, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It was a desperate need at one time, and now it's irrelevant. So my question is really simple. Right now, there is something that you want that you don't have, and you really want it. Like, if you're a young assistant professor, you want to get tenure.
Right.
If you're a tenured professor, if you've got tenure, you want to have good publications so you can become a tenured full professor with name and acclaim. You want more money, you want a bigger house, you don't want your in-laws to move to Australia, whatever it is, something you desperately want and you don't have it, and it's causing turmoil to your life in your life. And my question is, and this is a profound question, would you rather get what you want, or would you rather outgrow your need for it, as I outgrew my need for just like Daddy, just like Mommy? And each one of you has outgrown the need for a lot in your life. Would you rather get what you want, or would you rather outgrow the need for it? And as I said, don't answer the question, but I want you to think about it, because it is a profound question. And those are the kinds of questions that I really ask in my programs, because they get people not only to think differently, but eventually, if you engage with that, you become a different person and everything changes.
Good one. I do have follow-up questions on that, as usual. I'm sure other people have too. But I do want to make sure that we get through some of the questions that that have been raised on the Excel spreadsheet, and then maybe we'll switch over to Elena pretty soon, because this is part 2, right? Okay. So one question was Gaurav Singh asks, ego is the sole cause of our numerous worries. How can we control or diminish it? And I don't know if you'd answer that it needs to be diminished.
Actually, you don't need to diminish it so much as to understand that it really doesn't exist. Ego is a fiction. And the more you feed this fiction, it doesn't work. Uh, because this really comes down to a whole bunch of things. What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? Who am I really? And stuff like that. So let me ask you a question, Raj.
Yeah.
What would you think of a scientist who arbitrarily throws away somewhere between 25% and a third of his observations because they don't fit with what he believes?
I'd say that he's very biased, unscientific.
Would you have a great deal of confidence in this scientist when he told you something?
No.
When you know that he's thrown away 25 to 30% of his observations?
No.
Yeah. You are that scientist, Raj.
Really? How do you know?
Well, I'll tell you. Well, tell me if you agree with me. Let's say we meet at a cocktail party and, we're introduced and I say, who are you? And you might say stuff like, I'm Raj Raghunathan and I'm a tenured professor at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm married to a woman who's also a tenured professor. I have two lovely children and I'm bothered about whether or not I'm going to pay, something along those lines, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Now, is it or is it not a fact, Raj, that you go to sleep and you dream, and in your dream, you're not Raj Raghunathan, tenured professor. You might be, Jason going after nubile females, or you might be Cleopatra deciding whether you should remain loyal to Julius Caesar or make out with Mark Antony or any of
Stop.
those.
Stop right there.
Yes.
How do you know so much?
I read your journals. Right?
Okay.
And there's also times when you simply disappear. There's no Raj, there's no wife, there's no children, there's no college tuition. There's isn't even Cleopatra or Jason. They're all gone, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is not something I'm making up. This is, or anything you believe. This is your direct experience, correct?
Right.
Okay. But when I ask you, who are you? Do you ever mention, well, some of the time I'm Raj Raghunathan, professor, but there are other times when I'm Jason and still other times when I'm not there at all. Do you ever mention that?
No, I don't.
You're totally ignoring anywhere from 25 to a third of your waking hours where you have direct experience that you're none of those things, right?
Right.
You're throwing away more than a third of your observations.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also partly because I think that the most efficient way to answer, and there's social norms and things like that, right? I mean, if I got into all these things, so Jason and everything, you'd probably say, you know what, forget that.
On lies, so we're not coming on that. It is your direct experience, you're not. So here is something I'm postulating to you. If you were Raj Raghunathan, you'd be Raj Raghunathan all the time. But it's your own direct experience that you are not. There is a substantial chunk where you're not Raj Raghunathan. Some of that chunk you're Jason on Friday the 13th, you're Cleopatra, and some of the time you're just not there at all. And this is your direct experience, correct?
Right.
Well, if you're not Raj Raghunathan some of the time, is it possible that you're not Raj Raghunathan at all? That Raj Raghunathan is no different from Cleopatra or Jason?
Yeah.
And if you look at what the mystics are telling you, they're telling you exactly that. This is the illusion that you are playing out, but what you really are, and I alluded to this in the last talk, where I talked about the screen, which is the basis on which you put both the horror movie and the romantic movie and the war movie or the suspense thriller or whatever. You are the screen, but you persist in identifying with a particular body, mind, intellect, and that is really the source of all of your anguish. And once you recognize that this is all a mass drama that you're playing, and you're creating all of this wonderful chaos and reveling in it and getting caught, once you realize that you're none of this, you'll find that you don't have to think about it. That is enlightenment. As it says in the Ashtavakra Gita, Mukta Bhimani Mukto Hi, the only thing that keeps you bound is the thought that you are bound. So, time for you to recognize that your real nature is free of all of these. Now, this is easy to state. It's easy to get an intellectual understanding. We've done that. It's taken maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But actually coming to the point where you're anchored on it is a lifetime or many lifetimes work. But even if you start on that journey, even an intellectual understanding of this will give you tremendous solace in dealing with that, because it'll make it easier for you to identify with the actor rather than the character.
Yeah, as Mel mentioned, gives you that kind of freedom.
This is all this Maya, this is all that's going on. And, I always have the ability, even if it's for a few seconds, to step out of it. And those few seconds make a huge difference in how you experience the phenomenal life that we're all a part of.
Wonderful. So I think that we need to kind of shift now gears a little bit and maybe take some questions that have been coming up. Elena, are you there? Alrighty, so I'm going to pull you up, okay, in a couple of seconds, and I'm going to split the screen in a way that some people recommended that I do. Not me on top, but Professor Rao on top. How do I get Professor Rao on top? Oh no. I thought this would be easy to do, but I guess not. Okay, I wanted Professor Rao you to be the center, but I'm not able to pull you up. I think you need to be the host in order for you to be the center. I think, okay, on this particular program. But so be it. Somebody told me that it was distracting seeing all four people. I really apologize for this, guys. But try to ignore everyone else except Professor Rao or focus on the person who's talking. Okay. All right, Mel. I pulled up Elena, but you also had some thoughts earlier on, and I don't want to deny you the opportunity to chime in. So please do go ahead first, and then we'll shift over to El. El, it is awesome to see you. How's it in Peru?
It's great. It's a sunny day. It's soon Mother's Day, actually tomorrow, so we're all waiting to celebrate.
Wonderful. Mel, go for it.
Well, as fate has it, there's a train passing by right now. Let me see if it stopped. I feel like I'm in like a Western movie, and I'm like on set at a Western, and the train's passing by. I think maybe my thought got answered because I don't feel like I don't remember what the burning question was. But so I think I'll just go on.
Okay.
I'll defer to the questions from the audience, but I appreciate that, Raj. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. Very good. By the way, Professor Rao, Satish is here. Hi, Satish. How are you doing? Both you and I know from my batch when I took the course in the spring of 2009, he was there. So just wanted to give him a little bit of a shout out. Yeah, go ahead, El.
Okay, so we have many questions, and since we were talking about purpose, I wanted to read this question from Monica Jimenez. We're talking a lot about purpose in life, but can you live without a purpose or without knowing which one is yours? And I think it's very hard to find it, and I'm interested to know if you can live fine without finding it out.
Yeah. I run into this all the time. People are always looking for purpose. And I would like to make very clear that purpose is not something that you find and you don't go around desperately looking, and one day you don't have purpose and the next day you found it and now you have purpose. Purpose is something you create, you do not find it. And that's very important. Just as I said, passion doesn't exist outside in the job, it exists inside you. Purpose is exactly the same. You don't find it, you create it. And as you take the first step towards creating it, it becomes easier and you spend more time and devote more emotional energy to it, and it grows stronger. This is like a cathedral you're building, and the foundation of that cathedral is the emotional energy you devote to making it. And you keep building it and you keep building it, and eventually one day you find, hey, I built a cathedral. So you don't go out finding it. That's a myth. You're not going to find it out there somewhere, and you've got to look desperately till you find it. You create it right where you are.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So empowering.
I just want to add something here. A lot of Professor Rao's answers are very, very deep, and they cut to the chase in the sense that they get to the root of the problem, and that is going to be the ultimate solution. Okay. A lot of the other people, if you ask them the same question, they're probably going to give you an answer that's going to solve maybe the symptoms rather than get to the original source of the disease, so to speak. If you're interested in solving the symptoms, there's one approach that I found to be quite useful, which is the approach of the Ikigai, or what Sir Ken Robinson calls the element. Basically, the idea is that you surely have a bunch of things that you really enjoy doing, surely have a bunch of things that you're very good at doing, and the intersection of those two is your element. Start there rather than at what will pay you the big bucks and what will make you famous and what you think the world needs. That's more extrinsic. You kind of focus on the intrinsic, and that is probably going to lead you closer to what you might be satisfied with or what you might think is your purpose in life, and more along the lines of your passion. And I don't know, I'm just putting it out there in case some of you find that to be useful. But I do agree that ultimately you want to get to where Professor Rao is leading us. which is kind of to get rid of the disease rather than just the symptoms. Elena, go ahead. You had another question, I think, coming up.
Yeah, can I just give a little comment? Actually, yesterday I was just reading about this book, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, and he was describing how it's important is for people to have their purpose. And he was talking about prisoners of concentration camps, like those who had purpose could survive, and those who didn't have purpose were dying. So he was like making a very big distinction between these two groups of people. So he was saying that purpose is really, really important in this aspect.
Absolutely. In fact, Viktor Frankl's life work was devoted to why is it that under conditions of extreme adversity, such as in Nazi concentration camps, some people positively thrived and others crumbled and went to pieces. And the study of that was really his life work.
Right.
Carry on. Next question.
Okay. I have here some questions about actors and characters. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you. Go ahead.
We can hear you.
Elena, you've stopped.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Yes?
Yes. We've been able to hear you throughout.
Can you
It's
hear
something
me?
taking photographs.
Yeah.
Okay, now? Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you throughout. Are you able to hear us? It looks like you're not able to hear us. Yeah, she's not able to hear us. Okay.
I can't hear you. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear her?
Yeah.
I think Raj, she probably can't hear us.
Yeah, she can't. Maybe she can't hear us. Yeah, that's what I was.
So
but she said that she can hear us.
Find out yourself, huh?
All right. So let me just kind of take over from Elena, although my heart breaks when I do this. Just until when she comes back in terms of the audio. So Dawn asked this question, and sorry guys, I know that there's lots of other questions earlier, but I'm just kind of focusing on the ones that are coming up right now. So if you asked a question earlier and it did not get answered, please do type it in again. Okay, so Dawn's question is, what if it's a purpose or gift that you have that is not valued by society? Okay, so you want to do something, you think that this is an important thing to do, but you don't get any kind of positive reinforcement from the external world. You don't get money, you don't get fame, nothing. What do you do?
This is really an internal question. Why are you doing it? Because it calls to you, or because there is something external associated? People say, oh my God, this is so wonderful, Dawn. Yes, yeah. We have been so indoctrinated into believing that we need our worth to be affirmed by someone else, by our children, by our partner, by our parents. Everybody say, oh, you're great. That's the ego gratification part of it. And if you really think about it, it's a drug. And the more you get, the more you want. You really want everything to be about it. We all live in a me-centered world. A simple thing, your partner gets a great job offer and your first thought is, how is this going to affect a relationship? Okay. So recognize that this is though, and find out what is there in your life that you want to do that really calls to you. And the only reason you do it is it gives you immense satisfaction and fulfillment, totally irrespective of whether anybody even knows about it. Reading a book, watching a movie, it doesn't matter. Or maybe writing poetry. For us, writing poetry because it gives me pleasure isn't enough, right? You have to write poetry, then it has to be appreciated by people, then it has to be read widely, then it has to be published, then it has to become a bestseller, then you have to become a poet laureate. And that's the spiral we go on. Break that spiral. Yeah, you have to do some stuff because you're the character in this wonderful drama we're playing, and you have to earn a living and make money to support the other characters that are in your life, and all of that is fine. But do some stuff simply because you get enjoyment out of it, irrespective of whether anybody acknowledges it, applauds it, or even knows about it. And the more you think about it, the more. In my syllabus, I have a beautiful story. And by the way, you have a copy of my syllabus, I think, but if not, put the link to it. And it's a wonderful meditation by Anthony de Mello. And he says, consider two circumstances. And one is you've just done something big. You won Wimbledon, you've become CEO, whatever, and there are these gala celebrations, and people are coming up and congratulating you, and you give a speech, and everybody claps, and they all say, "Yeah, yeah, how great is this person?" And how do you feel? And the other part is you've had a friend whom you haven't met for a long time, and the friend comes over, and you sit down in front of the fire, and you have a couple of beers, and you exchange stories, and you just feel good. You're not trying to prove anything to him or her. He's not going to prove anything to you. Just sitting down, having a good conversation, a couple of beers, and totally relaxed. Which one of these do you want more of in your life?
Second.
The first is a drug, and the more you have of it, the more you want it. The second releases you from that drug. So the first thing for you, if you're an addict, is to recognize that you are an addict. If you don't even recognize you're an addict, you're never going to break free. So this question is a perfect one to say, hey, you're got the symptoms of an addiction. Start recognizing that is your issue.
Yeah, it's awesome. So, Elena, I'm going to pull you back up, and hopefully this time around it's going to work well. Just so you know, we were able to hear you, and I thought that I heard you say that you were able to hear us, but you kept asking us the same question: are you able to hear us?
Yeah,
No.
I kind of at some point I stopped hearing you and just separate words, and then I don't know why. It just
Maybe the
for some
internet.
reason
Yeah.
must be
So, do you have other questions that you pulled
Hey,
up?
you guys. I'm
Yes.
actually. I want to say
What is
goodbye.
it,
My
Mel? Go
service
ahead.
is terrible, and I don't want to
Yeah,
interrupt you.
sure. Sounds good. Sounds good. I'm going to hide you, Mel.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you
Bye.
for having me.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's this interesting question from Rama. If we're aware that we outgrow all our wants, then how do we motivate ourselves to strive and excel in life?
The very notion that you have to strive and excel is a clear indication you've not outgrown all your wants. Because the question doesn't arise if you have.
Probably it's about whether we should aim for something. If I know that tomorrow I won't want it.
You should aim it, because all of us have a vision of the world. This is the way the world should be. And in your vision of the world, there's a substantial role for you, even a starring role. There's a role for you in terms of your finances, in terms of your hierarchical position, in terms of the impact you have, and so on. So, whenever you have such a vision, by all means, it's not only good to go after it, it's necessary for you to go after it. But do that because, this is the preference I have, and I'm going to try my level best to achieve it. I may succeed, I may not succeed. Whether you succeed or not has no bearing on your emotional well being unless you let it. What you have to do is you have to sever the if then model. If this happens, then I will be happy, satisfied, fulfilled, whatever. You have to sever the if then model. And when you do that, you will find that every day is a blast. And yes, you will go out and you will strive. And you will not strive because it'll make you something that you're not. We're always looking for fullness. If I get this, then I will be full, complete. But as it says in the Indian scriptures, Purnamadam, Purnamidam, you are always full. The notion that there is something external that you have to do or get or be that will make you full, that's the fiction. That's the model that's broken. So you have to recognize that it's a broken model. Everything you need for your complete fulfillment and happiness is with you right now. And the only thing that's preventing you is you're searching for it when it's already yours. There's a wonderful scene in, I have a book, P.G. Woodhouse is one of my favorite authors, by the way. And in fact,
Mine too.
his book is required reading in
Right.
my course.
Leave it to P. Smith. Leave it to Smith. Not P. Smith.
When Lord Emsworth is searching for his classes, and everybody is searching with him, Lady Constance Gable, Beach the butler, and the efficient Baxter comes in and says, "Have you seen my glasses?" And he says, "Yeah, they're hanging down your neck." So he had it all along, and he's searching desperately for it elsewhere. I thought, that's a perfect Vedantic story. That's what we're all doing. We're searching for something which is already there.
Right. Okay. So, I know that there are a lot more questions coming up, and we have 15 minutes. I just wanted to kind of put it out there. So if you have questions that have not been answered, please do type them up. Okay. And in the meanwhile, Elena, back to you. Do you have another question?
Yeah, there's one that I wanted to ask from our spreadsheet, from Excel spreadsheet. So
Okay.
this question is from Lily. She says that mythology, especially the Hindu mythology, portrays God to be perfect, and no doubt they are. But the society wants everyone to follow their footsteps. But most people don't associate it with their concepts of happiness. What is right? Following the footsteps which are believed to give happiness in the end, or following what our own definition of happiness is?
I would say that if you really want to be happy, you've got to get rid of the false notion that you're going to find happiness, that you have to do something that will enable you to be happy, and recognize that happiness is already inherent in you. What you have to do is release it as opposed to find it externally. And the process of inquiry that I repeat earlier, I mentioned that in our last conversation. We're all God stuff. So if we're all God stuff, how come we don't recognize we're all God stuff? So I would say the most profound question in life is, how did the one become many? And life, or the purpose of life, if as Raj asked, if there is one, it's to go back to being the one and recognize that you were never not the one. There's just this veil of illusion that came in. So as you proceed on that quest, you will find that you no longer ask, "Am I happy?" In fact, I've got a very simple touchstone for that. If you ask, "Am I happy?" the answer is no, because the happy people never bother asking that question. They're right in there. So get to the point where you are on that quest. And I have a very good analogy for that. And this is very powerful, at least it'll be very powerful to some people. So what happens is, the only thing you have is your awareness. And I mentioned the last time, your awareness is like a flashlight. You can shine it on anything you want. Take the flashlight of your awareness and shine it on awareness, on your awareness. Now, this is getting really profound now. It's a little bit like you're in a completely darkened room and you come in there and you have a flashlight and you shine it on the mirror, and you shine your flashlight on the flashlight in the mirror, and all of a sudden it coruscates brilliantly. That's a pale analogy, but that's what really happens when you take the flashlight of your awareness and shine it on who am I? Who is the person who's asking all of these questions? Does this person exist? And when you start shining the flashlight of your awareness on your awareness, you go into a different space, and this is where words start to fail us, because we've gone into a region where words are the obstacle rather than the helper. But now we're going really deep, so I'm going to drop that there. Go on to
No,
the.
no, that's good. That's good. So that's your forte, so to speak, Professor Rao. You're a deep man.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is what that's the perspective that I think people expect from you, and it's good to hear that. If for no other reason than to remind ourselves that that's the final stop at some level, to get there. So John Zakur had a question that I want to answer, which is that, are we going to have a trilogy next time? Unfortunately, no, but we'll definitely have Professor Rao again at some other point in the future. But next week is going to be a good friend of mine. His name is Viral Acharya. He and I got our PhDs together at NYU, me in marketing, he in finance. And he went on to have a scintillating career, ended up with the last round in India as the deputy RBI governor, which is
It's much
like,
smarter than you, Raj.
what's that?
Much
Much
smarter.
smarter than me. Much smarter than me. Yeah, as is most of the world, it turns out.
I would say that.
So yeah, great guy, and he's going to talk a little bit about maybe even diametrically the opposite topic. Okay, so we're talking about deep philosophy and spirituality here with Professor Rao, and he's going to talk a little bit about the financial impact as he sees it of the COVID-19 outbreak and the pandemic. So he's going to be here on Friday, it turns out, not on Saturday, just so you know. And I'll send out an email and remind you guys, of course, but I just wanted to put it out there. All right, there's a huge comment by Radha Mandayam, and I don't know if you want to summarize that into a question, Elena, or I don't know if you read it, or you had another question in the meanwhile. And I
I
just want
had
to remind.
another question meanwhile because I
Okay,
combined two. I
why don't
have
you go ahead and ask it, and I will try and summarize what Radha is asking
excellent.
here.
Thank you.
The next one. Okay, go for it.
So I hope you didn't talk about this while I was away, but there's two questions that are basically about the same thing. You were talking about actor and character, and so one person is asking what actually is the difference between acting and character, and the other person is asking to if you can give some tips how to practice identifying ourselves more with actor rather than the character.
Absolutely. See, what happens is you become the character when you associate your ego with this, stuff is happening to me or I am doing it. So whenever we do something, you pick up a sport and you become good at it and I did it, or you work hard and you get promoted and I did it, or you give a contribution, you go off and make food bags and pass it on to the people who are lining up for food banks, and I did it. And the more you think along those lines, the more you are really feeding your. I don't know if I shared this the last time or not, but I'm going to do that. I have a workshop on leadership. And in my early days, I used to have a conversation, say, how many of you want to be inspiring leaders? And virtually everybody would put their hands up. And then I'd say, if you really want to be an inspiring leader, you're pretty well advanced on the wrong path. And then they'd kind of be embarrassed and the hands would be up, but they wouldn't put it down, but they kind of pull it down so have their hands halfway up. I don't do that anymore because it's not a good idea to embarrass your audience. You're not accomplishing anything anyway. But I was very serious when I said, if you want to be an inspiring leader, you're pretty well advanced on the wrong path because it's all about you. I want to be an inspiring leader. And what you're really saying is, I want people to do what I would like them to do, which perhaps they don't want to do. So I've got to figure out how to make people do what I want them to do when they don't want to do what I want them to do, which means I've got to be a manipulator. I learn how to manipulate them, which is not a very nice thing to do. Of course, I'm being deliberately provocative here, but there's more than an element of truth in what I just shared. So my take on that is different. If you want to be an inspiring leader, don't try. Don't try to be an inspiring leader. Instead, be personally inspired by a vision which is bigger than you are and brings a greater good to a greater community. And you have tremendous flexibility in defining both the greater good and the greater community. But it's only when you can find something which is bigger than you are, to which you can subsume, if not your whole life, a big chunk of it, that you can get into the kind of life we're talking about. Because then when you learn to communicate your vision, and if you're really anchored in it and you become a good communicator, whoever comes in touch with you will be inspired because he or she doesn't have a choice. That's how you become an inspiring leader. It's like, when Gandhi was starting off, he never said, I want to be an inspiring leader, I want tens of millions of people to follow me. He started off with the passport laws are unjust and I will not let them stand. And he was a British trained attorney. He had verbal fluency, so he used whatever talents he had to organize protests against the passport laws. And later, when he came to India and led the fight against colonial British, he wanted to end colonialism and he wanted the British to leave as friends, not as enemies. And he marshaled whatever he had. And in the process of doing that, he did become an inspiring leader. Even today, 70 years after he passed on, he's still a figure of inspiration to many. This is not a counterbalance that there are many people who are definitely not inspired, in fact, quite the reverse, but there are millions who are. So that's how it goes. So when you're saying, how do I become the actor, not the character, think of everything that happens as it didn't happen by you or from you, it happened through you. You are the instrument. Like, for example, if you find any part of this interview fascinating or you find it inspiring, it didn't come from me, it came through me. And I can definitely tell you that because all I've simply done is I've stolen the concepts of great sages from every wisdom tradition. But they spoke in language and used examples that were relevant to the time and geography that they were in. I simply took all of that stuff and clothed it in different clothes. I function in major business schools, corporations, the business world in the West at present. So I simply put it in language and used examples relevant to that audience, and it works. But they're not my ideas, they're timeless ideas. So whenever you're doing something, start thinking in terms of this is not happening by me, it's not happening from me, it's happening through me. And I'm immensely grateful that I have been chosen as the vehicle through which this happens. And the
Good.
more you anchor yourself in that rather than I did it, the more you will find that you're drifting to a place where it's easy for you to identify with the actor, not the character. Just be immensely grateful that you have been chosen to be the instrument.
Awesome, Professor Rao. Thank you very much. And just a very quick comment here that I was going to ask Radha's question, but it turns out it wasn't a question. It's more of a comment or a suggestion, which is to every 6 months look into yourself and ask yourself, am I doing things that are aligned with my purpose? And just kind of adjust based off of what that answer is. And in a way, it's related to the idea of awareness that Professor Rao mentioned earlier. He was talking about shining your awareness on your own awareness. This is maybe one layer of onion removed, and you're not looking at your own awareness through your awareness, but you're looking at what do you think your purpose is using your self-awareness and introspection. And I think it's a useful comment. Couple of other things here. Patty says, what's wrong with living with a purpose? I don't know if Professor Rao is saying it's a wrong thing. I think that the idea is that the purpose, at some level, if it's larger than yourself, that's a better purpose to have than a purpose of, I want to do this and I want to show the world, I want to persuade people. And correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Rao, but it seems like, that's one way to interpret what you're saying.
Everyone to ask yourself, am I doing this because this needs to happen, or am I doing it because I need to be seen as causing this to happen? Just ask yourself that question. Is it more important that it simply get done? Or is it more important that you be acknowledged as a person who got that done? And that'll tell you where you are.
That's awesome. And by the way, guys, I really appreciate it. Lots of you have come in here. Already more than 500 views on this, as far as I can tell. And you guys have come here to support this community and be part of this community. And I'm really appreciative of that. And you guys are doing a small bit, your bit, and as I'm doing my small bit, and everyone's doing their small bit to gather together and have a happy hour. And I'm really hopeful that you're having a happy hour right now. Okay, so why don't I just see some of that with a thumbs up or a smiley face or something like that? Just tell me if you're having a happy time, and it's nice to be gathered together like this as a community.
They're having a headache, Raj. You ought to send them Tylenol.
I doubt it. Okay, all right. So we maybe have time for one last question, Elena.
Okay, maybe we can choose this question that's related to the current situation in which we all are. So, how to deal with the repressed memories and emotions during the lockdown? What can we do to stay?
Yeah,
to feel better?
What if you're ambushed by repressed memories and so on during the lockdown? They say an idle mind is the devil's workshop, right? So you're here, you're feeling like alone, you have time on your hands, and you get ambushed by all these repressed memories and negative thoughts.
Just observe them. I've got an exercise which I actually use in my program, which is sit down in a comfortable armchair and just watch your mental chatter. Don't go off into a sexual fantasy. Don't go off into this is my to-do list and I haven't accomplished or anything of that. Just sit down and observe where your mental chatter takes you. If you can observe, pick something, the curtain, the weave on the curtain, or the depth of the pile of the carpet, and just observe it neutrally and watch your mental chatter. It's the most fascinating movie you'll ever watch in your life. And if you do that, a lot of repressed stuff will come up. But understand that these memories don't have the ability to do any damage to you unless you become them as opposed to observe them. And if you anchor yourself as an observer, you'll find that they'll come out and it's almost like a catharsis. It's there, but it'll go off. But you have to remain very, very, very firmly anchored to the observer. If you lose that, then you get away.
That's the thing. I mean, it's a little bit of a vicious cycle almost, in the sense that if you haven't practiced being the observer before, then it's very difficult to do it. And I think that it's particularly difficult when you're in a stressed out period in your life. When you're having stress and anxiety-provoking experiences, it's particularly difficult, in my experience, to be the observer, right?
That's why I like to say that, you are going to be hit by a tsunami. Everyone is, sooner or later. When you get hit by a tsunami, it's a wonderful idea to surf on it and look down and say, isn't this a wonderful experience? The problem is that you can't learn to surf when the tsunami hits you. If you want to surf the tsunami, you better become pretty good at surfing the 2-foot waves. And if you become good at surfing the 2-foot waves, you have a chance when the tsunami hits. So that's what I advocate. Begin immediately, anytime, start being the observer. And that's what my entire program is about, because I state in the syllabus, this is not a program that ends. It's something that you begin, but it's the rest of your life journey.
Mm-hmm.
So important for everybody to know that. Huh?
Okay, so I think we are out of time. We're exactly at 11, and so we got to stop. So one last question for you, Professor Rao. Okay, what is the secret behind your beaming aura? Is it because you really practice what you preach, and therefore it descends down into clarifying the way that you look?
I found this Hollywood makeup person, and I took it to the stars, and I paid her an enormous sum of money. So she taught me how I can project that. So
Yeah.
that's what happens.
All right. Very good. Thank you very much, guys, for coming again. Really appreciate it. On to Happy Smarts Happy Hour number 6 next week with Viral Acharya, who was the Deputy RBI Governor for the Government of India. And he's currently a professor, always was a professor at NYU, New York University. Okay. And I'll send out information about it. And thank you. I'm immensely grateful to you, Professor Rao, for coming.
Right? See you.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for the comments. Muchas gracias. Then we have a lot of Spanish comments as well.
Adios.
See you for the next time. Thank you.
Bye, Elena.
Bye, Raj. Hope it was, well, sorry for that problem. I don't know what happened really, but well.
You're still streaming, by the way, so I'm going to stop this.